This is a production of Cornell University.
Cool, okay, thanks for bearing with me. So this is just a quick overview of where we're gonna be going in about the next hour. So we'll start off talking a little bit about fellowships and grants, what they are, why we care about them, and then obviously from our title, this workshop is specifically about one fellowship, and that's the GRFP. So we'll start out by talking about some of the eligibility and the rules associated with this, and then we'll kind of walk you through what it's like to apply, starting off kind of big picture from contacting faculty and kind of developing your project, and then we'll go into some of the more nitty-gritty details about how that all works. So, okay. So just a little bit about us and why we're talking to you right now. So I'm Kate. My experience with the GRFP is that I applied once while I was applying to grad school. I didn't get it, and then I reapplied during my first year at Cornell, and I got it. And the second proposal that I wrote when I got the fellowship is actually for a project that I'm still working on, but that is, I'd say, maybe uncommon, and lots of people change their research a lot after writing the application, even if they do get it.
And my name is Lauren. I also applied to the NSF GRFP during my application to grad school, and it was not funded, but it was a great way for me to work with my advisor and work on a project together. And I'm still working on that similar project through a different funding source in that lab.
Ah, yes, and we're here to answer questions.
Please interrupt us at any time.
Yeah.
Questions.
Okay, so scholarships, fellowships, grants, what's the difference? So this language kind of gets funny because different programs will refer to kind of the same types of funding opportunities with different language, but in general, I think of a scholarship as something that's just paying your tuition to help you go to school. Fellowships are something that I generally think of as paying your salary or like paying you a stipend while you're in school, which is awesome. And then grants might do that as well, or they might be more for research funding. So why we talk a lot about fellowships is that they're one way to help you stand out when you're applying to grad school. So it's definitely possible that applying just increases your chances of being accepted because you stand out that you're like pursuing this source of funding. And then life with funding is easier. So when you come into a program with your own funding, it means that you probably will spend less of your time teaching, you have more time for research, and in some cases, having your own funding will mean that you can do the research that you really want to do, and you'll be less tied to like your supervisor's grant or something. And as Lauren kind of hinted at, this is also just great grant writing practice. So going through the application process, you'll really have to think deeply about your ideas and what you really want to do, and that's just like an awesome thing to do and will help you out even if you don't end up getting funding. So goofy. All right. So in this workshop, we're obviously talking specifically about the GRFP, which stands for the National Science Foundation. Can you guys still hear me like this? I'm trying to. Thank you. I appreciate that feedback. I'm gonna do a little wardrobe change. Improvement? Improvement. Yeah, all right, cool. All right, so yeah, in this workshop, we're gonna talk specifically about the National Science Foundation, the Graduate Research Fellowship Program. So there's about 2,000 awards per year across all of the STEM fields. The award provides 3 years of stipend at about $34,000 a year, and that amount does go up over time, like to adjust for inflation and all that good stuff. And it also provides tuition support. And I'm also just gonna say, I forgot to say this before, we're gonna be sending you all of these slides in addition to a bunch of extra resources. So don't stress about like writing stuff down right now. You're welcome to take notes, but we'll send all of this to you. And so, okay, in addition with the GRFP, there are kind of these extra bonus opportunities that you can get with it. And so those include these opportunities to do government internships, like with a federal agency. So those are kind of some cool extras. So with the GRFP, one thing to keep in mind is that it's possible to make yourself competitive and get into this kind of zone of contention where you're one of the top applicants, but then it's kind of a lottery within that. Okay, so this is our general timeline overview of how the GRFP works. So we have the exact dates for the 2018 award competition. So the application will be due at the end of October. Then for some reason they give your reference letter writers about an extra week. Then your letters will be due. So then, woohoo, you submitted your application, you feel awesome. Yes, you feel awesome. And then you're gonna go on to finish your grad apps and interview throughout the winter. You'll hear back from schools, then you'll hear back from the GRFP before the decision deadline where you decide if you're gonna go to grad school. And so the dates might change a little bit for the GRFP, but it's generally kind of like along this timeline. Also, please like raise your hand, ask questions at any point, or just shout them out. Yeah.
So, in terms of making yourself competitive on the apps, that's what you apply for the grant, not necessarily that you got the money.
Yeah, so I'm just going to repeat that question. So the question was about how does kind of applying for the grant end up helping your grad school application? And yeah, I think you're right that just seeing that you're applying, that you're trying to make that happen is something that schools like to see. And then also typically when you apply, you may contact a PI that you're actually interested in joining their lab and talk to them about your project idea, because you'll end up proposing something that's very specific that could be directed at a specific lab. So that's also a way of showing that you're really interested in a place and that can help your application. Okay, so fun stuff, eligibility and rules. So you're eligible to apply for the GRFP. You can apply as many times as you like before you start grad school. So you can apply when you're a senior in undergrad, anytime before you've started grad school. If you take a year or two off, you can keep applying during that time. And then once you're in a program, graduate students are limited to one application, and that would be either during the first year or the second year of graduate school. And unfortunately, if you don't have US citizenship, national or permanent resident status at the application deadline, you won't be eligible. And you also become ineligible if you've completed your grad or professional degree by August 1st of the year of the application. But there are exceptions to this, and I'm definitely not an expert about GRFP eligibility, so if you have questions, definitely come ask, and likely what will happen is we can put you in touch with someone who is super familiar with this. At most schools, there is someone who will kind of be the person who oversees all of the GRFP recipients, and they're like a really good source of information. Okay, so you've submitted your application at the end of October again, woohoo. So now what's gonna happen? So there's a panel review, and this, the panelists at this stage come from broad areas of related research. So I'm in ecology and evolutionary biology, and my panel would probably either be ecology or evolutionary biology. So they're super broad. So, I study plant pollinator interactions, but the people who read my application could study a whole range of topics within ecology or evolutionary biology. So those panelists really might not be super knowledgeable or well-versed in the technicalities of your discipline, so that's something to keep in mind as you're writing. And so the review criteria include these two big pieces that we'll talk about more. Thank you. Those include intellectual merit and broader impacts. So intellectual merit is basically this idea that your work should have the potential to advance knowledge either across or within fields. So there should be some kind of like novel aspect to what you're proposing that will advance science. And then broader impacts are this idea that NSF wants the work to have this potential to benefit society. So that could be the research itself, like if you work on something that has a lot of applications to agriculture or fighting diseases or things like that. But you can also have broader impacts through activities that are related to or supported by the research. So if you are involved in some kind of scientific outreach program where you interact with the public, that's a great way to have broader impacts too.
Yeah, and I just want to add to intellectual merit. So like Kate said before, it's somewhat unusual to work on the exact project you propose to the NSF. And in this application, they don't ask you for like a budget for your project. So you can really propose almost anything. Like don't propose a Mars mission or something insane. But like, you don't need to have, you can go a little bit bigger than you think might be feasible for a lab. Like, something that might not be exactly what you're going to do, but really fits into intellectual merit and shows that you know how to design experiments and has some broader impacts. Again, within like the vein of your field and not going too big, but you don't need to be limited as much as you would for some other applications.
Yep. Did you have a question?
Yes, so with the panel, are they looking, or well, I guess are they grading you on a certain percentage of what the intellectual and broader impacts would be, so that whoever of these 2,000 people who are getting is like, okay, well, this board, okay, she's got a 30% broader, but her intellectual is like 60%. So right now she's at the 90%, and they take those top percentages of 2,000. Like, okay, well, anybody over this, the top, they get funding. So you want to kind of get not one versus the other, but a good mix of both to raise you up.
Yes. So the question is about how exactly intellectual merit and broader impacts are scored, and yeah, the answer is definitely that you need both. So if one of them is super high and one of them the reviewers think really isn't as great, you won't just get the fellowship because you have great intellectual merit or great broader impacts. You need really to have both of them be well developed. Yeah. Okay, so here's just a little bit more, again, about what makes a successful application. So we've been talking about intellectual merit and broader impacts. The panelists really like to see creative, original, or transformative concepts, which just even saying that made me nervous because, oh my gosh, like how are we supposed to be doing that at the beginning of our careers? But you can do it. You just take time to really think about what would push your field and try to propose something that you feel like would be cool to see that maybe hasn't been done before in some way. They really like to see well-reasoned with an organized basis for activity and a way of assessing success. So I think we'll talk about this more later, but that comes from having clear hypotheses that you can test with your project. So they really like to see it a focused project that is clear and it seems like you can do it and you'll really learn something from doing it. So another thing that matters are the qualifications of the individual and the organization for the activities. So it can be tricky if you're proposing to move into an area of research that you really haven't worked in before. So it helps with this to kind of play to your strengths. Like, I've already worked with this kind of system before, so that will help me do this project. Or the lab that I'm joining has worked in this system for a long time, so that will help me do this project. And then kind of building off of that, they're also looking for, do you have adequate resources and support at an institution or through collaboration? So again, like, does it make sense that you can do the project based on who else you're working with and what they have available?
That's actually a question I was going to ask. So you don't have to actually be affiliated with an institution. So for example, if you were working with the state or county Department of Natural Resources, if you were working closely with them and they were helping to monitor and your research was getting cataloged with them, you could potentially still apply for this. And right.
Yeah. So the question is kind of about like who your collaborators can be, and yeah, if you're not necessarily always working with an academic institution, can that kind of work towards this? And I think, yes, it can. I will say that
It makes it stronger.
yeah, so being affiliated with an institution is sort of essential on some level, because you are applying to go to grad school, and getting a PhD, typically involves being affiliated with a university, although there are some programs that will be joined with like conservation organizations and things like that. So I think, yeah, you want to stress that you're going to be in a certain lab or in a certain graduate program, but then if you know that you have those connections to state agencies or conservation groups or something like that already, that can be really great to highlight. I just wouldn't rely solely on non-academic collaborations or connections. Yeah.
Sorry to make this obvious, but how specific is our association that I'm supposed to be applying this before we apply?
That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
Yep, so that's a great question. So the question is, how specific should your connection be to a specific lab or program since you're going to apply before you apply to grad school? And the answer is pretty specific, I think. So you will write this proposal as if you have decided and you are going to work with a specific professor at a specific place. And if you don't end up doing that, that's fine, but you just kind of pretend in some ways that that's what you're gonna do. So it also could be the case that as you're applying, you say, oh, I'm gonna work with this person at this place to do this project, and you may even be sharing that application with other PIs who are not the person that you named, but that's okay. You just kind of want that placeholder in to show that you have something really specific in mind.
Yeah, I say to add to that, when I was applying, I reached out to a professor that I wanted to work with and said that this is kind of my interest area. Do you have projects like this, or can we do something together? And then he had some ideas, and we worked together to, I wrote up, I sent him drafts, and we would go back and forth on this proposal, and he wrote one of the reference letters for this that we're going to talk about later. So it was very much working with him throughout the process.
Yeah.
What if you're applying to multiple schools and would be therefore doing potentially totally different projects with like within the same area, obviously, but like if you get this funding but you do not get into that grad school, what happens then?
Yep, so the question is, obviously, I'm telling you to be specific and pick one person, one program that you're tailoring your application to. What happens if that's not where you go, or you don't get in there or something? That's totally fine. So no one holds you to what you write in your GRFP. It's fine. And we'll get into this a little bit more, but part of the GRFP is kind of just seeing how well you can develop a project and write about it, and like how confident the panelists are that you can do science on this level as an early stage grad student. So yeah, whether or not you actually pursue that project, it really doesn't matter one way or the other. Yeah.
How early would you recommend emailing or getting in contact with the person that you want to do this project with? Because if you send that information October, you might want to email them a bit earlier. Yeah.
Yes. So the question is about how early to start contacting people, and I'm gonna hold off on answering that because we are gonna get to that in a minute. So any other questions about kind of this stuff, like very big picture, how the application is reviewed? Someone have a hand up over here before we good? Okay.
And I just want to actually say about which, just make it totally clear, the NSF funding follows you anywhere.
Yes.
Like it's tied to you, not to an institution. So you can take it, just so it's totally clear.
Yep. Yes, so holistic review. Okay, this slide is going to be a disaster, I'm so sorry. But I'll walk you through it. So this is all about the timeline that we just had that great question about. So basically, given this timeline that we've already outlined for the GRFP, yeah, you're going to want to start coming up with your ideas for projects in the summer and early fall. And I think that really getting into the writing, contacting professors is something that you want to start kind of before the school year starts in September. So like mid-August, I think is often a really great time. If you do it super early, it's possible that people are doing field work or they're just kind of not on email fully, and you might kind of get lost. If you do it too late, people are already super busy with the semester. So once you've started thinking about your ideas, you want to contact potential PIs with a written project idea and then let them know, or as you talk back and forth more, then later you're going to want to follow up with a full draft. Yeah.
Would this potentially be that first cold email that you would reach out to this advisor with, or should you like establish a rapport and then be like, here's an idea?
Yep, so the question is, would you put this question about the GRFP right in your first cold email to the professor? And I think that's totally fine. Yeah, I think it's great early on to say, hey, you know, this is who I am and what I'm hoping to do. You know, you're attaching your CV to that. And then you can also say, and I'm working on a GRFP application, like, is that something that I can talk to you more about? And you just kind of go from there. So as you're starting this process, we want to highlight the resources that you're going to have. So you have professors that you can talk to, both maybe your current professors if you're still in school, or the professors that you had when you were an undergrad. You can talk to graduate students. So we are all here to help either this fall or in the future. You can also talk to the grad students at some of the institutions that you're going to, or that you're applying to. You can ask people in the labs that you're interested in, hey, did you apply for the GRFP? Would you maybe be willing to look at my materials? And then there's lots of other sources for writing support. So for those of you who are still in school, I know a lot of schools have like writing centers that you can go to and bring, you know, drafts of your work, and those can be great for this. So yeah, at the bottom of this slide, it's okay to ask someone to read the work. So that's something that like I can't stress enough to you guys. Don't feel like you have to work on this in a vacuum by yourselves. You should get as many people as you can to read your work and give you feedback. It's still going to end up being your work at the end of the day, but putting yourself out there to get feedback is really going to help. All right.
Right. Do you guys have any other questions up to that point? It's a lot of information. All right, then we'll keep rolling. So we're going to talk about some of the details of the proposal itself. So in this, you need to have two statements. One is a research statement, and this is 2 pages, which is not a lot of space to say everything you need to say about a research project. And then a personal statement, and you have 3 pages for that, where you talk about relevant background and kind of your future goals. And these statements will be presented to your reviewers in the same packet, and they should be kind of related. So for instance, here we say, if you love dolphins, don't talk about microbes in your personal statement and like dolphins in your research statement. Have some cohesive flow between them. And we're gonna talk about a few more examples of those. Yes?
So how much do you think that research experience that is specifically related to your project weighs, like compared to other things like broader?
So the question was, how much does the research you've already done weigh into whether or not you're being accepted for this fellowship? I think it certainly helps to have, say that you have this experience, I think for a couple of reasons. So first, you'll be able to talk about it in a little bit more comfortable way, so you kind of know some of the language and know some of the techniques already. You won't be learning something new to write this proposal. And I think also you'll be able to demonstrate that you're also capable of doing this proposal. It might just sound a lot more feasible to the reviewers if that is what you're proposing. And you can talk about that also in your personal statement too, so that'll be something that you can talk about the research you've done. So it certainly is a part of it that helps.
Yeah, I'll just jump in and say, I think that for getting the GRFP in terms of what you propose, there's probably some kind of sweet spot, kind of range where if you've totally done the same kind of project before and you're building off of it, that can be okay. If you've done things in a similar area that aren't like the exact same, but there's kind of some shared skills, I think that works really great. It might be a little bit more challenging if, you know, I were to propose something that's like super genomics heavy and I never took a class in undergrad where I did PCR. Also a true story. So just like with that kind of thing, like you want to kind of be aware that obviously you're going to make some jumps, and that's great because you're going to grad school to learn new things, and if you were just doing the same thing you've done in the past, that wouldn't be that exciting. But at the same point, you want to kind of show that you're prepared to do the project needed.
Single space or double space? Because 2 pages.
The question is on single space or double space. These are single spaced. And we're going to go over some of the little formatting rules later too. All right, any more questions? All right. Oh, and speaking of the personal statement, the next workshop, we're reviewing personal statements. So there'll be some great time soon. All right, so the other part of your application are 3 recommendation letters, and they should be some from people who know your motivations and who you can trust to write a really excellent letter about you. It's really helpful if they come from different points or different aspects of your life in undergrad. So for instance, maybe a professor you worked for, or someone who's your advisor, or maybe someone who is in a non-research related job that you're in. So for instance, my reference letters were 2 professors, and I worked in a tutoring center, so I was the director of the tutoring center there. And you also want to make sure they can all speak to your ability to do graduate research. And so some of this is helping them do that, because they're probably writing letters for quite a few students. So you want to share with them your CV, share with them the statements you're sending to the NSF, and also share any review criteria or things you want them to highlight. Like, make it really easy for them to write you an excellent letter and say, this is what the NSF wants to hear. Here's some things that I've done. Please put this into a nice letter. It's totally fine to ask for that and give them that guidance.
I had a friend of mine who actually said, write a skeleton for them, because it makes it a lot easier, and then they can fill in a little bit of details on their own, so you can get it back faster as well, and you kind of like steer them on track.
Yeah, so the comment was writing like a skeleton letter for your advisor. I think, yeah, that's a good advice. I think depending on your relationship with your advisor, maybe like having sentences for them might be a bit too far, but I would certainly at least like bullet points of like, here's the criteria, here's my CV, and if you could please make sure you talk about this experience that was by no means stepping on their toes or maybe making them feel a little bit too much. But again, it depends on, you know, how you know them. All right, so we've been talking a lot about these, and we're gonna send you about 5 examples of ones that were successful applications for graduate students. And so there's 4 of them that are from EEB, and those are the first 4 titles, and 2 of them are from SIPS, and those are the last 2 titles. We're also gonna send you unsuccessful ones too, so you can read them all. And yeah, and just one thing to keep in mind while reading these were all from different years, so some formatting and some other rules might have changed. So if you see something on the NSF website that says do this, and you see something else in the statement, follow what's on the NSF website. Don't look to these as an example that you must follow. But they're all really great because they deal with presenting intellectual merit and broader impacts in different ways. Some people have in their research and personal statement, you know, a bold title of intellectual merits and a bold title of broader impacts. Others are more integrated throughout. So you can see a bunch of different examples of how people kind of tackle this, and yeah, they're really great to read through. Also, we mentioned earlier connecting the research statement to the personal statement. You'll see in some of these how people have done that. And we're gonna talk about that a little bit more too.
Yeah, and I'll also just jump in and say that since we've compiled and received even more applications from graduate students that we'll share with you, including a bunch from entomology. So we have those as well. Is there a question in the back? If you have a question, someone else has a question.
Like obviously it's probably easy to know, like I know whatever. I have one from somebody and that's fine if not. But in ways I feel like that's more helpful because I heard a lot of people say that they really felt that that's what actually
Yeah, the question is if you'll receive personal statements too, and the answer is yes. So we have research and personal statements. Some of them, some grad students were only willing to share one, so you might have one that it's not a complete application, but there are at least 4 more complete applications that we'll give you. So, all right, and then the really fun stuff, the formatting rules, you have to follow them. Like, there's no, if you don't, for many grants, for this application and others, if the rules aren't followed, they will not review your application. So please take them seriously and don't be like, well, if it's size of 11.75, it's gonna fit. Like, don't try it. So it's 8.5 by 11 paper with 1-inch margins. You can use Times New Roman or LaTeX fonts, but you can use 10-point font for references and figure legends. And again, it's single-spaced, and it's 2 pages maximum, and that's including everything you want to put in. For the research statement, it's 2 pages maximum, and that includes everything you want to put in that research statement. Yes?
So for this research statement, like do most people just like talk about one proposed project or do you put like multiple experiments into one?
That's a good question. So the question was, is it one experiment or is it multiple experiments in one? So in general, it's one experiment with a couple hypotheses or objectives. So for instance, in some of these statements, you'll see it's like, you know, working with mycorrhizal fungi and it's characterizing different metabolites or something about the genetic control of mycorrhizal attachment to plants. So it's the same project with, you know, maybe 2 or 3 hypotheses and objectives.
Yeah, I'll jump in on that and say that I think that that's a really tricky part of this application because you have so little space, yet you want to show to panelists, look what I can do all of these awesome things. So I think that the guidelines about like how much exactly to try to tap in, it kind of really varies too with your subfield and the type of research that you're doing. So with that, I really think that the best way to approach that is just through getting feedback from people, because grad students or professors that you talk to will have a pretty good sense of, hey, it feels like you're trying to pack too much in, and so all of your kind of sub-projects aren't as well developed as they could be. versus like, oh, maybe you can add a little bit more here. So yeah, I think it's kind of hard to think of a hard and fast rule for how much research to try to pack in, but it is something to be aware of that if you try to put your whole dissertation into 2 pages, it's kind of a struggle.
All right. All right, so again, formatting, so make sure you take full advantage of the space. Most people will fill up the full 2 pages for the research statement and the full 3 pages for the personal statement. And then also, don't forget that you can use things like bold or italics. So maybe some people will put their main hypotheses or objectives in bold just to draw the reader's attention to this is the main idea of this paragraph and the main idea of the next paragraph. And then there's a certain citation style. It's the citation style used in nature or science papers. And how many of you have used a citation manager before? Wow, I did it in undergrad, so I'm very happy to see that. So if you are unfamiliar with what a citation manager is, it's 3 different softwares. Like there's some free ones like Mendeley or EndNote, I think are the 2 big ones. And what it is you can upload various papers you've read to this manager, and then through Microsoft Word or whatever word processing you're using, you can insert citations through there, and then it'll build a references list for you in the citation that you tell it to. And we're not going to talk about how to use those here, but your library resource at your undergrads certainly know how to use those and can definitely set you up with one of those. But it's certainly helpful both for this and for the future to make sure you don't make a mistake in this citation style. And then you can have figures or images in this proposal, and if you have a graph or something that can save you 4 sentences of what you try to explain, it's really excellent. And don't forget, these panelists are reading so many of these, so if you can have a nice figure or graph, it's going to make yours stand out a little bit too in all of the words they're reading. Yeah?
That's like a good size, because you say that like this could save you some sentences, some words, but if it's like taking up like a quarter of the page, then I don't see much merit in that, possibly.
Totally. So the question is, what's a good size for a figure? And I think pretty small. So if you can have something that you can fit into probably like maybe 1.5 inch by 1.5, or something that fits small, and if you can't make it work, then try it out. But yeah.
Kind of along those lines, wouldn't you use those sentences anyway, explaining the graph, or in like a caption or something? So wouldn't that, instead of just having the word, you have the graph plus the words, right?
It's true. So the question is if it's really going to save you words, since you need to have a caption too. So the captions can be in 10-point font. So it can save you a little bit of space. And often you don't need to necessarily repeat everything that's in the graph. You can, if you're showing a graph of like plant growth to like nitrogen, you can say something broad about the trend versus like specifically like these 4 plants had higher growth per nitrogen input than these plants. So you can say something, I should have more an example before talking, but you can say something like there's a differential plant growth based on nitrogen accumulation, figure 1, and that's a shorter sentence. And I think if you go to like a writing center too, with some of this, they'll also be able to help figure out how to make the most of that space that you're using in the figure.
Yeah, and I'll also add to that and say, I think those 2 questions about how much space and then will it actually save you space, I think that really speaks to the fact that having a figure can be great, but you want to make sure that you're doing it in a situation where you're really going to benefit from having that figure. So I think if it's something where you can have a small graph that really clarifies what an expectation looks like, that's great. If you have an organism with some kind of phenotype that's really cool looking and will be easier for your reviewers to understand and visualize from a photo, that's a great use of a figure. But there's going to be lots of other things that you write about that in this super short format, the figure is not necessarily going to help. So.
Yeah, for a figure, as long as you can read it, that's how small it can be.
So the question is how small the figure can be. I don't know about like Axes Legends if those can go below 10-point font.
That could be,
Yeah,
that could be a question to ask, like a GRFP contact person
Yes.
at your institution or another institution. Yeah, I would say in general, I don't think, if something's in the figure, there's a bit of text, I don't think that they go crazy about that, but I would say, again, this is a place where getting feedback comes in, so if you're showing your proposal to different people who might vary in their eyesight, you'll get a sense of like if something is too small, and people will get cranky about looking at it.
All right, so for the writing aspect, again, you really do need to be specific. So stating your hypotheses and objectives really clearly and how you will test them is really important in a research statement. It has to happen. Your broader impacts are also important. So, and you want to relate those both in your personal statement and your research statement by establishing a link through those. And we have a quick example. So, for instance, in some of the proposals that we'll share with you at the end of the research statement, or maybe somewhere in the middle of the research statement, they'll say, I will continue my longstanding efforts of mentoring underrepresented minority students by involving students in summer research through fellowships on this aspect of the project. So you're tying in different, if you've done like tutoring and want to bring that into your research statement, that's how you would do that. And again, you'll see some examples of those later. All right, and there's a lot of resources to help you out with this. So like Kate said, we're sharing these slides with you. We're sharing a bunch of applications with you. There's also a lot of databases, both at Cornell, Michigan, and then there's scholars. The NSF website has all of the guidelines that we've kind of talked through and more. There's even more than we've mentioned. There's a Twitter link too, and don't forget to ask your PIs, other grad students you've worked with, other people who've applied. And yeah, again, we're sharing all of the documents we have as well. So, is there any?
Nope,
No?
that's it.
Okay, all right. Do you guys have any questions? Yeah.
How much longer do you expect NSF to offer
Yeah, so the question is, how much longer will the NSF have GRFPs? I guess we both hope a long time. I don't know when the funding cycle is, but they're definitely having it this year.
Yep, so the 2018 competition, I would say, is almost certainly going to happen, knock on wood. The 2019 will be a new program solicitation. So the way it works is that typically like in 3-year chunks, they will kind of revise some of the application guidelines, or they put out this new solicitation with dates for 3 years. So 2019 is a little bit more unknown, but I'd say 2018 is pretty likely. I really hope that this program will continue. I think it's been really successful, and it's hard to imagine them cutting it. It's staffed in a different way from another program that they did cut that affects graduate students. So because of that, I'm kind of hopeful that this will stick around. But I guess with that being said, it's a great reason to apply this coming year. Like if you think that you might be interested, don't wait. Yeah.
You said it's a 3-year support, so let's say 2019 was the last year and the arbitrary year, does that mean you still get the full 3 years funding, or does it get terminated?
Okay, the question is, if the program were to be terminated in the future, would you still get your 3 years of funding? And that is a scary hypothetical that I don't know for sure, but I imagine that you would still get the funding because, so the program that the NSF recently canceled, that was another program for graduate students, is called the Doctoral Dissertation Improvement Grant. And I know that people who got those before it was canceled, they're still getting that funding. So even if they hadn't spent it all at the point at which it was canceled, that's still available to them. So I think that they're pretty good about things like that.
Yeah, outside of the GRFP, do you know of any like database like grants that graduates applied for prior to being accepted into a graduate program? Because I know like certain like smaller hubs like Wisconsin Ecology Society has grants for just like people that are doing research in Wisconsin. You know, like a database with a lot of that stuff that they could be applied to.
So the question is about a database for other grants that you can apply to before you're in grad school. And I can't say that I know for sure, but I think that there are resources out there, and we will ask around and try to find those for you all. So I know my department maintains a list of grants and fellowships, but the vast majority of those are for students who are already in a program. So I think the GRFP at this point is a little bit special in this respect, how you can apply for it as an incoming student. The EPA used to have a similar fellowship. That program has been discontinued. I'm not sure about like DOE, Department of Energy, if they have anything like this.
I don't know about the DOE. I know for the USDA, it's all after, once you're in a program, there aren't any pre-programs through the USDA.
But that's a great question, and we can look into that more. Yeah. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I think I might already know the answer. Double check. So you guys mentioned you need two aspects in your paper concerning like one of them is concerning how I guess your research betters better science. If your research is, if you're doing research for the sake of like knowledge or for the sake of like, I guess, science and stuff, would that still be considered what was the broader impact? That still be okay? Be like, you know, I'm doing this for the sake of science.
Yeah.
Like developing mankind.
Yeah. So this is a great question. So the question is about what if you're applying and your research is more kind of on the basic research level. Like we talk about basic research where the goals are really generating new knowledge versus like applied research where you're solving some kind of problem like a disease or something in agriculture. And I'm a basic researcher, so I understand this a lot. And so for that, I would say that my broader impacts really focus more on the kinds of outreach activities that I would do kind of outside of and in addition to my real like, science research project. So for me, that was talking about doing outreach activities at the high school in the rural area where I do my field work and being involved in a couple of different mentorship programs. So yeah, with the broader impacts, and I think you'll get a better sense of this from reading people's statements, but you can really have things that aren't like lab experiments or field work that will count towards that. So it's kind of these other activities that we do as scientists that count towards that.
Yeah, and I think to add that, so I work in a very applied field, and the NSF GRFP tends to steer more towards basic science proposals. So they want to see a hypothesis that you're testing and how you're going to test it. So for a lot of the stuff we do, it's like, well, I kind of want to try this on a farm and see how it works. And that doesn't really, even though it does have a broad impact, it doesn't really cut it as the main core of the research proposal for the GRFP. So it'd be some aspect of like finding out a genetic mechanism, and then your broader impacts, you know, saying that through this genetic mechanism, maybe it could help plant breeding or something like that.
So it's almost like a side, like not necessarily a side that or anything like that, but it's just kind of like, this is my research, like this is what I want to get into, and then, you know, it might be set up in this sort of way, but for right now, I just want to delve into it and see what happens.
Yeah, I think for the research part of the broader impacts, it can be more side note-esque, but for the other like outreach components like Kate was talking about, that can't be a side note. That has to be a more of a central part of your broader impacts.
Yeah, I'll add to that and say that I think NSF is really looking to fund people who they think are not only going to be great scientists, but also great members of the scientific community. So they really want to know that you're actually going to help mentor people or do some kind of outreach program or whatever. And they read a lot of these, and I think they're pretty good at knowing who's like phoning that in and who's just kind of like throwing that in there because they know they need it versus like someone who's really dedicated to you know, some kind of outreach activity. So I think like really highlighting that is important, and you don't want that to be like something that is,
Yeah, totally. And building off of that too, especially if you can talk about an outreach type activity that you've already done and building off of that, that sounds a lot more, you know, powerful and something that you can do versus if you've never done a certain outreach activity before. You can still mention it, but certainly play to like what you've already done and what you can seek to and build on.
So with basic research, as far as the broader impacts, that's to focus on outreach and how you can disseminate what you learned in the project, as opposed to applied research, which the broader impacts kind of speaks for itself in what you're going to apply to.
Yeah, I think that that is a good point. So the question comment was kind of, if you are a basic researcher, maybe it's better to steer your broader impacts towards the outreach activities you're doing. And if you're doing more applied research, maybe it's not quite the same. I think that is true to a large extent. Like if you do basic research and then you try to throw in a broader impact about how your work will relate to climate change, that's like something that people are going to see through pretty quickly and be like, okay, we all know that the actual point of this isn't to help like with conservation in the face of climate change. So you kind of have to be careful about like staying true to the actual goals of your research, and if your research doesn't naturally have applied connections, I would say don't try to push it. Instead, show your broader impacts through outreach activities and things like that.
Yeah, and from the other side, so if you have a more applied project, so like working on disease-resistant cucumbers, if you don't have like trial and liaison farmer, like how it's going to help farmers in your broader impact statement, I feel like, wait, what? Like you just talked about a very applied project, but it's not part of your impact statement. So I guess, yeah, kind of like Kate said, tailoring it to how you're, what sort of project you're proposing and make sure it's consistent throughout. Yeah.
I always heard that like your intellectual merit should reflect like how you are in terms of your research, but the like benefits should reflect how you are as a person. So like being able to, like for example, I want to like use my placement to indigenize science. So like that's more, it shouldn't necessarily be like this is what my research is going to do for the world, but like this is what I can do with my research in tandem.
Yeah, I think that's a great comment. So the comment was kind of about like the intellectual merit kind of being really more strictly about the research, and then the broader impacts can be a lot more about the personal human side of doing science and being a scientist. And I think that's generally a great way to do it. Gregory, did you agree with that?
Yeah, I just wanted to, so there was a question about external fellowships besides the GRFP. And actually those first 3 links up there on your institutional fellowship databases are all to external fellowships. So when you have this PowerPoint, that's a great resource for that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
For that, I was going to also mention the website the lady told us about yesterday, Pathways to Science. They have a section that is for graduate students, and also like different organizations like American Plant Society or organizations that are specialized in your field can have fellowships or grants to help you pay for stuff.
Great. Yeah. So that comment was reminding you about a website you maybe heard about yesterday, Pathways to Science, which is a great resource. And there's always going to be more like field-specific resources out there. So talking to grad students and professors can be another way of finding those if you don't already know them. Cool. Well, I think we're about out of time, so thanks everyone for listening. And if you come up with more questions at any point, we'll both be around. We'll make sure our emails are out there, so feel free to keep the conversation going.
This has been a production of Cornell University, on the web at cornell.edu.